Well, welcome to this week's Natter, and with me is Borders rugby historian and writer of the excellent Border League storybook. That's Laing Speirs. Now, it's always good to talk to you, particularly about Border League, and it's the Border League subject that we're going to have a little talk about today, because the good news, let's start with, first of all, is that the Border League will be more competitive this season.
Well, you and I have been screaming for this to happen for some considerable time now. When you think back to some of the games that have been in the past, when it was highly competitive, and compare them to some of the dross, that's the only word for it, that we've seen in recent years, I'm delighted to see the change.
And of course, one of the reasons for this has been the problem that the Border League fixtures come out and immediately we get some bad weather. They're replaced by the priority fixtures, which are the League, the National League, obviously Premier League, and the Cup fixtures, which means that the Border League fixtures have just been kicked into touch, literally, and at the end of the season they get fitted in willy-nilly.
It's a great shame that happened. You can see when somebody's sitting at Murrayfield and saying the national competitions come first, where can we make economies, where can we make changes? Border League's a natural target, I regret to say. But it is a pity because when they look at the incidence of good games that have been played, highly competitive games between not just the top named teams, but teams at all levels in the Border League, turned on some good stuff over the years. It's a shame they're denied the chance to play on prime time and with good audiences and being fitted in at short notice when often the supporters don't know the game is on. I remember, and I'm sure you and I have talked this before, Stuart, but we've had in recent years games being played on a Tuesday night when you got to hear about it maybe on the Tuesday afternoon, if you were lucky. Might be in the Wednesday morning.
Yes, and of course teams putting out development sides and not really taking it as seriously, I suppose, which you can understand because the priorities are at Premier League level and Cup level, and Border League was downgraded, I suppose, no other word for it. So that was happening. But of course now, because the RBS Cup has become regional, that means the Border League fixtures effectively are double headers, which means we're going to see the top teams in action.
Well, this is good. By top teams, you're going to see the better players because nobody's going to want to miss out on something that could be the gateway to big time.
We talk about the Border League, and I mean, you obviously have been studying the Border League for a long time. And one of my things is that I don't like the pool system, and I would rather have Berwick and Langham out of the main picture, but you disagree with me.
Well, I think because Berwick and Langham are border teams, at least on the extremity of the borders geographically, but they're there. I want to see them in there, and we've seen in our time some good performances by Langham, and us older brigade do remember when Langham won the Border League and the Scottish unofficial championship as well. So these were great days. So one yearns for something like that to happen again. If you exclude them, it won't. But I mean, I was never in favour of Haddington coming in because it struck me that was over the border. It was over the hill one at the other side of Sutra, and I didn't think that was a case that justified at all.
Of course, there's a point, though, in history. In the past, I think Carlisle were involved at one point, weren't they, in the Border League?
They were indeed. I remember when I was writing the book, I remember finding out about the Carlisle story. It was a fascinating one because, of course, they had been around for a long time. They were playing Langham long before, say, Hoyt were playing Gala. It was a very interesting story. And we never did find out why they perished. I think it was travel. I think the travelling was getting a bit of a problem. But they had played Gala and they had played Hoyt and they had played Langham, but they didn't last the pace. Pity, because the club did, but they didn't last in the league.
Now, one of the proposals that I put forward, of course, was to actually split the Border League into three and actually welcome on board clubs like Hoyt Harlequins and Earlston and St Boswell's and Walkerburn into a kind of Division 1, 2 and 3 split, which of course would have meant that things would be more competitive, particularly like if you had Berwick and Langham and Hoyt YM and Hoyt Lindeen and Duns together, you're more likely to get a more enjoyable game for the spectator and for the players, of course, rather than a Melrose 70 points to Berwick nil kind of scenario.
Yes, I think you're right. You quote figures like 70 points to nil. That is no good for anybody, never has been. And of course it perpetuates and encourages this idea that you needn't turn out your best team, because somebody who's won 70 points to nil against whatever it might be one week said, we've got another duff team coming up next week. We're not going to play our big boys at all. no, we'll play a junior side, in effect. That's not very good for the spectators. They're not all that keen, apart from those who are related to these youngsters coming on. They're not that keen on seeing a team shorn of its stars turning out, because they don't reduce the admittance money if there's going to be half a team playing.
So what about that kind of format then? I mean, would you subscribe to that? Because, as I say, it levels the playing field. It also keeps your 7 Premier sides in one division. You've got the East League teams down in Division 3 having competitive games and local games, and, of course, Division 2 the same.
Yeah, I can see a lot of merits in that, actually. A lot of merits in it. It's just a question of how it's going to end up. You've got 3 groups up there. At what point do they merge? This is the point. What's your thinking on that?
Well, it's very interesting because we've seen Berwick in free fall, of course, and we've seen Duns go down and out of the Border League and now making a bit of a revival. So it's the kind of thing where you could, of course, have a relegation and promotion, which was one of my first ideas. But then when you think about it, you could actually survey the scene on a yearly basis or a season's basis and see where everybody is. And you know, if a club applies to go into a higher level, effectively, that's something which could be taken into consideration. But I think as it is at the moment, you've got 3 sections of border teams which fit in quite nicely.
Yeah, I'm just a wee bit worried about the politics that are going to come into this. If you say you picked a representative from Jed and one from Selkirk, one from Melrose, and they're sitting at the end of the season in judgment on what happens next year, and it happens that Jed and Melrose or whatever are in the frame for relegation, It would not be a very satisfactory meeting. I would love to be at it, but I don't think it would be a very satisfactory one.
That's right. And politics obviously comes into it. And of course, one of the things which has come out of these Border League meetings when talking about my proposal, and no doubt others as well, is that people do want, the romance of Langham still being in there, and therefore Berwick still being in there as well. So bearing that in mind, and the clubs have spoken, and that's what they wanted, how about this for a new proposal, Laing? I think you may have read about it, but my idea now is to say, right, OK, we get rid of Haddington, we keep Berwick and Langham, so you've got 9 teams. My big thing is that everyone has to play each other, because I don't like the pool system. That's been well recorded and well documented in the past, for the reason that it is quite obvious, is that the winner of the Border League doesn't have to play 2 of the top teams, or more even, as was the case with Selkirk a few years ago, when they played 3 games, literally, before they got to the final, and they were the Border League champions. Now, the way I look at it is that now that we've got this system with the RBS Cup, making it local, everyone is going to be playing each other as far as the Premier teams are concerned. So you're going to get those matches played anyway as double headers for the Border League. Then it's just really a case of the Berwick side and the Langham side arranging fixtures with the big boys throughout the season, and that's something they would have to do. So you would get everybody playing each other. Now, of course, my initial suggestion was that you could do away with the Border League final, but of course we all know the Border League final has become a very popular event. So what about, therefore, you have the first team in the Border League at the end of the season playing the 4th in a semi-final playoff, and second against third in a semi-final playoff, another money spinner for the clubs, and you get to keep the Border League final, and playoffs seem to be the popular way to go.
Yeah, if that could be done, I go along with you on that one. I'm not at all in favour of this idea of you get prizes for not competing, and that's really what it amounts to. If you don't play the opposition, because often it was the better teams that were missing out on this one. No, I think it's essential that somebody who's going to be top of the Border League in whatever form it is is able to say, we played them all. We may not have beaten all of them, but we played them all, and we beat enough of them to justify our place. No, I'm entirely in favour of that. And I quite like this 1 playing 4, 2 playing 3. It is good. Just a wee bit worried about the timing of it all, bearing in mind that we've got these 7s now all over the spring. And would you imagine them being played on... Well, it can't be a Sunday because that's when that was 7s. It's got to be midweek, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd like to see a midweek, maybe the week before the Border League final has been decided, and at a neutral venue. And it's obviously a great money spinner. They're lighter evenings back then as well. So I think that would be something which would obviously tick a lot of boxes, and of course give 2 very meaningful additional local games.
Yes, it would be great, and as long as there was an element of competition, which there obviously would be at that stage, I don't think those who didn't make it would have any grumbles at all, because they had their chance, didn't they?
And you're still going back to the situation where everyone's played everyone in the league, and you get these 2 additional games. I mean, personally, I would say, well, whoever finishes top of the league after playing 8 games against all the others is the champion. But you have to also bear in mind the fact that recently we have had this Border League final introduced. It has been popular, so why not go one step further and add 2 semi-finals as well, which would be, I think, fantastic locally.
Yes, I would go along with that, Stuart. I would go along with that, certainly would. The reason that the final has been so good recently, I think largely the quality of the teams was so cream coming to the top of the pot again, which is the right way to play it. And that's what we're all about, really. Everybody wants to be at the top. If the best teams can actually do it, great, that's great. No, the 2 good semi-finals, excellent. It wouldn't matter if it was midweeks, summer, spring evenings. Yeah, it'd be fine.
So what about the clubs? Are they going to buy into that, do you think?
I'll tell you this, some will, some won't, and there'll be another Border League meeting at which will go on for a long, long time. I remember going to these meetings in the old days, and they have a knack of going on for a bit, but I'm told that nowadays they're actually trying to keep them under control. Yeah.
But who do you think would be against it, and who do you think would be for it?
I cannot see a reason why anybody should really be against it, apart from, well, maybe if they're having a very good sevens run or something like that, but I would imagine there'll be just as much money in this proposal as there would be in the sevens.
Well, we will see. We will see, Laing. It's always interesting, but just while I've got you here, the league structure, obviously, for the future seasons, taking it down to 20 teams playing national rugby. What's your own opinion?
20 teams. I can't wait to see this. I really can't. It's going to be fascinating. Look, we've got to live with all these changes that are coming, and nothing is permanent nowadays in this game of ours. I was looking up some old records for an article I was writing just a couple of weeks or so ago, and the formula then was such that you knew from year unto year unto year who was going to be playing whom and on what Saturday in the year. Fixtures never changed. We've got to live with change, and some of us are initially a wee bit reluctant to cheer when the changes came in the door, but we have to accept it. And I'll go along with this new proposals all the way, or virtually all the way.
Yeah, it was interesting as well because John Davison, obviously a key man behind it from the Scottish Rugby Union, and doing some fantastic work. And, the decision was the right one, I'm sure, for Scottish rugby in general. Okay. But interestingly enough, Jed Forrest and Kelso, and of course Jed being, he was former president of Jed Forrest, of course, voted against it. Now, you can obviously understand their position because this year we've got 4 teams, Selkirk, Peebles, we've got Kelso, and we've got Jed Forrest, who could, and I say could, actually drop out of national rugby next season. And that would be a disaster for those clubs.
Yeah, it would be. And now this is where you've got to sort of step back from the club's position and talk about the borders, because one of the great strengths of rugby in these parts, is the way that we either all hang together or we hang separately. And there's a feeling in the borders, it's still there, that we've got really to protect the border ethos. And I think that there will be a lot of tears shed if the likes of the teams you're just talking about were to drop out, either forced upon them from circumstances or from playing strength or poor results.
It's going to be tense this season.
Oh, yes. Well, we've seen it once or twice before. It got pretty interesting last year. I think you're right. I think it's going to be just as tense this year.